Part 1. What if your most cherished virtues, your compassion, your humility, your belief in equality, are not your greatest strengths, but the bars of an invisible cage? What if the moral code you live by was not designed to elevate you, but to keep you manageable, predictable, and weak? This is not a comfortable thought. It cuts against the grain of everything we've been taught about what it means to be a good person. But it is a question we must ask. For over a century, the ghost of one philosopher has haunted Western thought with this very proposition. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche, and he argued that the ethical system we call good is, in fact, a sophisticated psychological weapon, a system of control designed by the weak to disarm and restrain the strong. To understand this, we must first understand our own predicament. We must begin with an ancient story, one that is more relevant today than ever before. Plato's allegory of the cave. Imagine you are a prisoner, chained since birth in darkness, able to see only the flickering shadows cast upon a stone wall. For you, these shadows are reality. You know nothing else. This, Nietzsche would argue, is the state of modern humanity. We are prisoners in a cave of our own values, mistaking the shadows of morality for truth itself. This journey is about seeing the chains for what they are, and finding the courage to break them. Part 2. Before we can speak of escape, we must first diagnose the prison. We must study the shadows on the wall and understand how they are made. Our modern cave is a sophisticated construction, an architecture of control built not of stone and iron, but of algorithms, cultural norms, and social pressures. First, consider the walls of our cave, the digital screens we face every day. They are not blank slates. They are curated by what are known as filter bubbles and echo chambers. Internet activist Eli Pariser coined the term filter bubble to describe the state of intellectual isolation that results from personalized searches and algorithmic content curation. These algorithms, the invisible puppeteers of our age, study our every click, like, and share. They learn our biases, our preferences, our fears, and then they build a unique reality just for us. This isn't a neutral act of service. It's the construction of a personalized cave. The result is a society fractured into digital tribes, each staring at its own wall, seeing only the shadows that confirm its own worldview. Studies show that this digital segregation fuels effective polarization. Not just disagreement on policy, but a deep, visceral dislike for those on the other side. We no longer see fellow citizens. We see distorted, monstrous shadows of them, caricatures designed to provoke our outrage and keep us engaged. This is the first layer of our confinement, a reality tailored to our prejudices, where we are protected from the discomfort of opposing views. But what are the rules inside this cave? What is the common law shared by all the prisoners, regardless of their tribe? It is a deep and pervasive culture of mediocrity. In a healthy system, excellence is celebrated and emulated. But in our modern cave, it is often seen as a threat. Sociologists have identified a phenomenon in organizations called a culture of mediocrity, where social systems subconsciously conspire to marginalize high performers. Why? Because the high performer, the one who excels, implicitly challenges the status quo and makes the average feel uncomfortable. This discomfort gives rise to a more aggressive phenomenon: tall poppy syndrome. The term describes the impulse to criticize, attack, and cut down those who achieve success, to make them level with the rest. Studies on this syndrome reveal it is often driven by raw jealousy and a warped sense of egalitarianism, where the goal is not to lift everyone up, but to pull the successful down. This fear of excellence and resentment of success is codified under a new sacred value: safety. Not physical safety, but emotional safety. In their book, The Coddling of the American Mind, Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt identify the rise of safetyism, a belief system where the avoidance of emotional discomfort becomes the highest virtue. This ideology teaches three great untruths: that what doesn't kill you makes you weaker, that you should always trust your feelings, and that life is a battle between good people and evil people. Safetyism demands the world be scrubbed clean of anything that might challenge or offend. It manifests in trigger warnings, safe spaces, and the pathologizing of intellectual disagreement. It is the ultimate demand of the prisoner. Do not show me anything that disturbs the comfort of my shadows. And what happens when a prisoner dares to break these rules? What is the enforcement mechanism of the cave? It is the modern ritual of public shaming, known as cancel culture. This is not merely criticism. It is a collective practice of withdrawing all social and financial support from an individual who has transgressed the moral code of the herd. It is a digital mob that enacts a public spectacle of humiliation to make an example of the offender, ensuring others will not dare to step out of line. The punishment is swift, often disproportionate, and its goal is not dialogue, but exile. The digital echo chamber that polarizes us, the cultural demand for safety that infantilizes us, the resentment of success that mediocritizes us, and the public shaming that terrorizes us. These are not separate problems. They are the interlocking parts of a single, vast machine. They are the shadows on the wall, the laws of the cave, and the punishment for dissent. They create a world where strength is suspicious, ambition is arrogant, and conviction is dangerous. The question is, who built this prison and why? To answer that, we must turn to the philosopher with the hammer. Part 3. Imagine the prisoner who escapes the cave. His eyes, accustomed to darkness, are burned by the fire and then by the sun. The journey to the surface is painful, a violent tearing away from everything he has ever known. This escaped prisoner is the philosopher. He does not just see a different set of shadows. He sees the puppeteers, the fire, the cave itself, and the true world outside. He understands the entire mechanism of the illusion. This was Friedrich Nietzsche's self-appointed task. In his 1887 masterpiece, On the Genealogy of Morals, he takes a hammer to the foundations of our morality, not to destroy it, but to understand its architecture. Nietzsche begins by proposing a radical idea. The words good, bad, and evil do not mean what we think they mean. They are not timeless truths, but artifacts of a great historical conflict between two fundamentally different types of morality: master morality and slave morality. Master morality, he argues, is the original morality. It is the value system created by the noble, the powerful, the healthy, and the strong-willed rulers of the ancient world. For these masters, the concept of good was a simple act of self-affirmation. They looked at themselves, their strength, their creativity, their courage, their happiness, and said, "This is good." Their morality was born from a triumphant yes to life. Consequently, bad was merely an afterthought, a term of contempt for the weak, the sickly, the timid, the pathetic, everything they were not. Notice, the word evil does not exist here. The master's judgment is aesthetic, not moralistic. The weak are not sinful. They are simply undesirable, like a poorly crafted tool. Slave morality, in contrast, is born from the oppressed, the weak, the suffering, and the enslaved. It is, crucially, a reactionary morality. It does not begin by affirming itself. It begins by looking outward at the masters and with venomous hatred declaring, "They are evil." This is the birth of evil as a concept, a moral condemnation of the very qualities the master celebrates: strength, pride, and power. Only after defining its enemy can slave morality define itself. Good, in this new system, becomes everything the master is not. The slaves, unable to be strong, declare meekness to be good. Unable to be proud, they praise humility. Unable to exact revenge, they invent forgiveness. They are patient, compassionate, and obedient, not because they choose to be, but because they have to be. Slave morality is the transvaluation, the inversion of all noble values. It turns weakness into a virtue and strength into a sin. But what could fuel such a profound and world-altering inversion? Nietzsche identifies a single, potent psychological poison: ressentiment. This is not simple resentment. Ressentiment is a deep, festering, and impotent hatred that stews in the soul of the weak. It is the bitterness of those who are denied action. The master, when insulted, acts. He fights, he conquers, he forgets. His aggression is discharged outwardly. The slave, however, cannot act. He is powerless. So his hatred turns inward, it poisons him, and it becomes creative. This repressed vengeance, says Nietzsche, is the engine of the greatest event in human history: the slave revolt in morality. This was not a physical war, but a spiritual one, waged over centuries. It was a silent, cunning, and ultimately triumphant rebellion of the priestly caste against the warrior aristocracy. The priests, themselves filled with ressentiment, convinced the herd of slaves that their suffering was not a sign of their inferiority, but of their moral superiority. They taught that the masters, the beasts of prey, were evil and would be punished in the afterlife, while the meek, the lambs, were good and would inherit the earth. This is the genius of slave morality. It is an act of sublime psychological revenge. It takes the very source of the slave's misery, his powerlessness, and recasts it as the source of his salvation. His inability to fight becomes patience. His fear becomes humility. His submission to those he hates becomes obedience. And most brilliantly, his inability to take revenge becomes forgiveness. This new moral code doesn't just comfort the weak, it gives them a weapon. It allows them to judge, condemn, and feel morally superior to their oppressors, all without lifting a finger. It poisons the conscience of the masters themselves, making them doubt their own strength, their own instincts, their own right to rule. This, for Nietzsche, is the genealogy of our modern values. Whether religious or secular, our ethics of compassion, equality, and pity are the direct descendants of this slave revolt. They are the triumph of the herd over the individual, of weakness over strength, of ressentiment over life affirmation. We are the inheritors of a 2,000-year-old psychological war, and we have been living under the moral system of the vanquished, a system designed not to make us great, but to make us equal, equally small, equally safe, and equally imprisoned in the cave. This is the secret that Nietzsche, the philosopher with the hammer, reveals. The question now is, who are the modern puppeteers casting these ancient shadows on our walls? Part 4. Armed with Nietzsche's key, we can now return to our modern cave and see it not as a confusing mess of disconnected problems, but as a coherent system. We can begin to identify the architects of our prison, the modern puppeteers who manipulate the shadows on the wall. They are not conspiratorial figures in smoke-filled rooms. They are the systems, ideologies, and economic incentives that have perfected the logic of slave morality. Our first puppeteer is the algorithm. Social media platforms are not neutral town squares. They are finely tuned ressentiment engines. Their business model is engagement, and they have discovered, as Nietzsche did, that nothing engages the human psyche more powerfully than moral outrage. The algorithm is designed to detect and amplify the core emotions of slave morality: indignation, pity, and the burning need to identify an evil other to blame for one's suffering. The viral mob, the digital pile-on, the swift and brutal cancellation, these are not bugs in the system. They are the system working perfectly. The algorithm gives the herd what it has always wanted: a tool to coordinate its moral condemnation on a global scale, instantly and with devastating effect. It is the technological perfection of the slave revolt. Our second set of puppeteers are the masters of public image, who have learned to wield the appearance of virtue as a tool of power. This is where Nietzsche's diagnosis meets the cold pragmatism of another Italian thinker, Machiavelli. Machiavelli understood that for a ruler, appearing virtuous is often more important than being virtuous. This principle is now the bedrock of modern marketing. Consider the phenomenon of corporate woke-washing. A company with a history of labor exploitation or environmental damage will suddenly wrap itself in the language of social justice, not from a change of heart, but as a calculated marketing strategy. They post black squares, change their logos to rainbows, and run ads featuring diverse, smiling faces. This is the Machiavellian application of slave morality. Perform the pieties the herd demands, signal your allegiance to their values, and you will be rewarded with profit and shielded from their wrath. This performance of virtue extends to the individual level with influencer culture. Influencers build careers on a foundation of curated authenticity. They perform vulnerability and share struggles to create what psychologists call parasocial relationships, one-sided bonds, where the follower feels a genuine connection to a media figure they've never met. This illusion of intimacy builds trust, which is then monetized to sell products, lifestyles, and ideas. The influencer becomes a modern priest, a moral exemplar whose goodness is not a state of being, but a carefully managed personal brand. This brings us to the deepest, most unsettling layer of our cave. The French philosopher Jean Baudrillard, a true heir to Nietzsche, argued that in our media-saturated world, we have moved beyond simple illusion. The shadows on our wall are no longer just poor copies of a real thing. They have become what he called simulacra, copies without an original. Reality has been replaced by its signs. Baudrillard called this state hyperreality. Think of it. The rainbow logo during Pride Month doesn't necessarily point to a company with fair and equitable practices. It points to the idea of being an ally, which itself is just another image. The influencer's tearful post about mental health doesn't necessarily reflect a real moment of suffering. It is a performance of suffering, designed to generate engagement by referencing other performances of suffering. We are trapped in a hall of mirrors, where signs of morality no longer refer to any actual virtue, but only to each other, in a closed and endless loop. This is the ultimate triumph of slave morality. It has not only inverted the values of the real world, it has replaced the real world entirely with a simulation of its values. The cave is no longer just a prison, it has become the whole world. And the sun, the very idea of a truth outside the simulation, has been forgotten. Part 5. If our diagnosis ends here, the only logical conclusion is despair. If we are truly trapped in a hyperreal cave of our own making, where the very air we breathe is the poison of ressentiment, what hope is there? To leave the analysis here would be a profound betrayal of Nietzsche's ultimate purpose. His philosophy was never meant to be a eulogy for humanity, but a call to arms for the individual spirit. The goal of showing us the prison is to inspire the escape. This escape begins with Nietzsche's most radical proposal, a revaluation of all values. This does not mean embracing what the herd calls evil. It is not a call to cruelty or tyranny. It is a call to a far more difficult and courageous act, to put our own values on trial. It is the process of asking yourself with ruthless honesty, are my values truly my own? Or are they the inherited fears and resentments of a crowd? Do they serve my life, my strength, my growth? Or do they serve to make me smaller, safer, and more manageable? To reevaluate all values is to stop judging your life by the standards of the herd and to start creating standards that affirm life itself. But how does one begin such a monumental task? Nietzsche, in his poetic masterpiece, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, offers a map for this inner transformation. He describes the three metamorphoses of the spirit. First, the spirit must become a camel. The camel is the beast of burden. It kneels down and takes upon itself the heaviest weights, the weight of tradition, of history, of morality. It says, "What is heavy? Let me bear it." One cannot overcome a system one does not understand. You must learn the rules of the cave, carry the weight of its laws before you can earn the right to destroy them. In the loneliest desert, the spirit transforms into a lion. The lion is the king of beasts, the spirit of rebellion. It confronts the great dragon whose scales glitter with 1,000 years of thou shalt. To every command of the dragon, the lion roars a sacred no. It seeks to conquer its freedom and be master in its own desert. The lion is the critical spirit, the hammer that smashes the old values. But the lion, for all its power, cannot create new values. It can only clear the space for creation. For that, a final transformation is needed. The spirit must become a child. The child is innocence and forgetting, a new beginning, a first movement, a sacred yes. The child is the creative spirit, who now, free from the weight of the past and the fight against it, can create its own values, its own games, its own world. The child says yes to life, not out of resentment or reaction, but out of a pure, overflowing, affirmative joy. This journey, from camel to lion to child, is the path to becoming what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, or overman. This is perhaps his most misunderstood concept. The Übermensch is not a master race or a ruthless dictator. It is a goal, an ideal. It is the human being who has overcome herd morality, who has overcome the spirit of revenge, and most importantly, who has overcome himself. He is the one who has the courage to give his own meaning to the earth, to live by a code he has created, and to embrace his fate without complaint. The shadows on the cave wall are comfortable. The herd is safe. But the sun is waiting. The journey out is the only one that truly matters. It begins not by fighting the world, but by overcoming yourself. The question is not whether you can break free. The question is whether you will.